They said the boys stole a loaf of bread. Out here, in a land where mercy was rarer than rain, that was enough to hang a man or shoot him where he stood. The morning air in Dry Creek carried the smell of horses and was smoke, thin and bitter. The sky was pale, washed-out blue, the kind that made the land look even emptier. Dust clung to every boot, every plank, every breath. Clara held her brother Eli's hand as they stood before the men from Dawson's Ranch, the largest spread in 3 counties. Eli was barely 16, his shirt too big, his wrists too thin. In his shaking hands, he held the crust of stolen bread. It wasn't even fresh. Clara could see his lips trembling as he tried to speak, but no words came. Across from them sat Mace Dawson on his horse, the foreman who ruled the valley like a petty king. He was a heavy man, face red from whiskey and sun, mustache hanging low over a permanent sneer. "You think hunger gives you rights?" Dawson asked, his voice lazy, cruel. "This ain't charity country." Clara stepped forward, though her knees threatened to buckle. "Please, sir, he was just hungry. We ain't got work, and there's no flour left in town." "Don't beg," he cut her off, spitting into the dirt. "You think tears fill bellies? He stole from my men. That's theft, and theft's a noose offense." A murmur rippled through the onlookers gathered near the corral. Nobody met Clara's eyes. Nobody spoke. Fear ruled this place. It paid better than loyalty. Cole Avery stood apart from them, leaning against a fence post, arms crossed. His hat shadowed his face, but his jaw was clenched. A rifle hung loose in his hand, the way a man holds something too familiar to think about. He'd been with Dawson's crew long enough to know how this would end. Clara turned toward him. You were there that day at the mill, weren't you? You helped carry the grain wagons. Tell him, please." Cole didn't move. Dawson barked a short laugh. "My man, don't talk unless I tell him to." He nodded at one of his riders. "Do it." The rider lifted his rifle. The world seemed to narrow to the sound of the wind and the clicking of the hammer. Eli's eyes found Clara's. "It's all right," he whispered. Then came the shot. The sound echoed off the dry hills and faded into silence. Eli dropped where he stood, the bread falling beside him into the dust. Clara screamed, a sound that tore through the quiet and made even the horses rear. She fell to her knees, clutching his body, blood soaking through her dress. Dawson turned his horse without a word. "Leave them," he said. "Maybe she'll remember not to steal." Cole didn't move as they rode past him. His face was stone, but inside something cracked, the same sound a gun makes when it's cocked too long. He watched Clara cry into the dirt until the sun slipped behind thin clouds and the light dimmed. When he finally turned to walk away, the taste of iron filled his mouth. That night, he drank alone in the saloon. The place smelled of smoke and spilled beer. Men played cards, laughed too loud, and ignored the ghost sitting among them. Cole turned the empty glass in his hand. The reflection of the lamp caught his face. Hard eyes, older than his years. He could still hear the echo of that single shot. "You ever shoot an innocent man?" a voice asked beside him. It was a bartender, cleaning a glass, not looking up. Cole stared at the wall. "Out here," he said quietly, "ain't no such thing as innocent." But he didn't believe it anymore. By dawn, Clara had dug the grave herself. The ground was cold and stubborn. Her hands bled, her back ached, but she didn't stop. She buried Eli behind the old church at the edge of town, where weeds grew through broken stone. The wind whistled through the empty doorway as if saying a prayer no one else would. When it was done, she sat beside the grave until her tears dried into silence. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled with dust. Around her, the prairie stretched gray and endless, a place that seemed too large for one woman's grief. She whispered to the grave, "I'll make them pay." By afternoon, clouds gathered and the air turned heavy. She walked until her legs trembled, finally finding shelter in a half-collapsed cabin that smelled of rot and rain. The place had belonged to a widow long gone. Only a rocking chair and a rusted stove remained. Inside a drawer she found a revolver, small and worn, one bullet still chambered. She held it in both hands, trembling. It felt heavy, too heavy for her, but she kept it close. Outside, thunder rolled. The rain came in steady sheets, cold and hard. She sat near the window, watching the dirt road disappear under the storm. Miles away, Cole Avery rode through the rain. He should have been gone by now, south of the border, away from Dawson's reach. But something pulled him back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was that scream that wouldn't leave his head. When he reached the Dawson ranch, he found the foreman drunk and bragging about cleaning the town of rats. Cole listened from the doorway, his hand on the rifle. "You planning to burn that shantytown next?" someone joked. Dawson grinned. "Tomorrow. Smoke's cheaper than mercy." Cole's jaw tightened. He turned and walked into the rain, saddle creaking beneath him. The water soaked his coat, ran down his face, and mixed with the taste of whiskey still on his tongue. He didn't know what he meant to do, only that he couldn't ride away this time. By nightfall, Clara had fallen asleep in the chair, revolver in her lap. The fire burned low. When a knock came at the door, she woke with start, heart racing. Another knock, slower. She aimed the gun with shaking hands. "Who's there?" No answer. She crept closer, then pulled the door open a crack. Rain dripped from the brim of a hat. A man stood there, silent, a shadow against the storm. "Cole Avery." She aimed higher. "You get out." He didn't move. Then, wordlessly, he reached into his coat and placed something on the table beside her, the brown, torn hat Eli had been wearing when he died. Clara froze. Her breath caught. "I was there," he said quietly. His voice was rough, steady. He didn't deserve what they did. "Then why didn't you stop it?" she spat. He looked at her, rain sliding down his face. "Because I was one of them." The silence stretched. The wind rattled the shutters. Finally, he set a small sack on the table, bread, jerky, a flask, and turned to leave. "You stay away from me," she said, voice cracking. He didn't reply. He only said, "You'll need a horse. There's one tied outside. Don't wait till morning." She stood frozen as he walked into the rain, his silhouette fading into the darkness. When he was gone, she pressed her forehead to the door and whispered, "Why?" But no answer came, just the sound of hooves retreating into the storm. The rain stopped before dawn, leaving the land slick and gray. Clara packed the food, the revolver, and stepped outside. The horse he'd left waited near the fence, coat damp, reins hanging loose. She hesitated, half expecting it to be a trick. But the saddlebags held what he promised. Supplies, bullets, and a folded map marked with a red X. She traced a line with her finger. The shantytown. Smoke still hung faintly over the horizon. The memory of Mace Dawson's laughter burned hotter than fire. She saddled the horse, her hands unsure but determined. Back at the Dawson ranch, Cole faced the men he once rode beside. He stood at the edge of the yard, watching as they loaded oil barrels onto wagons. He'd heard Dawson's orders. By sunrise, the poor quarters near the river would be ash. He could have walked away. He almost did. But then he saw a child's doll lie in the mud, soaked from the night's rain, left behind by one of the families he'd once helped chase off. That was enough. He mounted up and rode out, fast. The road was slick, the wind biting. When he reached the outskirts of the shantytown, smoke curled from the rooftops. He kicked his horse forward, firing a warning shot into the air. "Get away from there," he shouted. The arsonist turned, startled. Cole fired again, this time into a wagon wheel, splintering it. Panic broke out, men running, cursing. From a distance, Clara saw the flashes of gunfire. She urged her horse forward. The smell of smoke filled her lungs. The world became sound and motion. The crack of rifles, the roar of wind, the scream of horses. Cole reloaded, fast and sure. His shots were clean, controlled. 2 men fell. The rest scattered into the hills. When he turned, he saw Clara running toward the collapsing barn. A child was trapped inside. "Clara, no!" he yelled, jumping from his horse. But she was already inside, trying to pull a wooden beam away. The roof groaned. Flames licked up the walls. Cole charged in after her, covering his mouth from the smoke. He lifted the beam, muscles straining, and dragged the coughing child out into the open. Clara stumbled after him, coughing, tears streaking her soot-stained face. When the barn finally fell, the ground shook. Smoke and rain mingled in the air until it became a gray haze. Cole set the child down and turned to her. "You're going to get yourself killed." "I didn't ask for your help," she snapped, but her voice trembled. He stared at her for a long moment, eyes steady. "Maybe not, but you got it anyway." They stood there amid the ruin, two souls bound by a single shot, by guilt, by hunger, by loss. In the distance, the thunder rolled again, softer this time, as if the sky itself was catching its breath. For the first time, Clara didn't look away from him. She saw not the gunman, but the man who'd chosen to stand between her and the fire. And somewhere deep inside, though she'd never admit aloud, she began to believe that silence wasn't always the same as indifference. Sometimes it was the weight a man carried when words weren't enough. As the dawn crept pale across the horizon, the two of them stood among the ashes, one with a rifle, the other with a single bullet left, and neither knowing yet what they'd become to each other. By the time the storm cleared, the air smelled of smoke and wet earth. The shanty town was half gone, its shacks smoldering piles of timber and ash. Clara stood barefoot in the mud, clutching a coughing child while the others huddled behind overturned wagons. The wind howled across the plain, carrying the sound of distant hooves. Cole Avery dismounted slowly, rain dripping from his hat brim. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes hollow from a night before. Around him, the ruins told a story no man could fix, only avenge. Clara met his gaze through the haze. Her expression was hard, but her voice shook. "You came back." He nodded once. "Couldn't sleep." A group of Dawson's riders crested the ridge, 5 silhouettes against the gray morning. Cole pulled his rifle from the saddle and chambered around. "Get the children behind cover." She obeyed, though anger simmered beneath her fear. He had saved them once, but she still couldn't decide if she trusted him or hated him. The riders advanced, rifles gleaming wet. One called out, "Avery, you picked the wrong side." Cole didn't answer. He lifted his rifle and fired. The first rider dropped from his horse before the others even had their sights raised. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder. Chaos followed. Gunfire cracked. Mud flew. Horses screamed. Clara ducked behind a wagon with the children, covering her ears. She could feel each shot like a hammer to her chest. One bullet splintered the wood inches from her head. She grabbed a rusted pistol from the ground, a fallen man's weapon, and peered out. Cole moved with terrifying precision, reloading without looking, each motion practiced and cold. But his eyes were alive now, burning with something fierce and human. He shouted, "Stay down." 2 more men fell before the last rider turned and bolted. The fight ended as suddenly as it had begun. Silence returned, broken only by the hiss of rain on dying fires. Cole lowered his rifle. His coat was torn, his shoulder bleeding where a bullet had grazed him. Clara rose, breathless, the pistol still trembling in her hands. "You didn't have to come back," she said softly. "Didn't have anywhere else to go," he replied. Behind them, the survivors began to move, women gathering what little was left, men searching for their dead. Cole turned toward the hills. "They'll send more." Clara followed his gaze, her jaw tightening. "Then we don't stay here." He met her eyes. "You ready to run?" She nodded. "Not run. Ride." They rode north into the wilderness, following a trail that wound between low ridges and tangled brush. The rain eased into mist, turning the world to shades of gray and green. The horses moved slow, hooves sinking into soft earth. Clara rode beside Cole, her hair damp, her face set with quiet resolve. The children and a few other survivors followed behind, clinging to whatever they carried. The land stretched empty before them. No towns, no fences, just open country and the hum of wind through the sage. After hours of silence, Clara finally spoke. "You said you were one of them once." Cole didn't look at her. "Still am, I reckon. Hard to wash blood off with rain." "Then why save us?" He sighed. "Because I've been hungry too. Stole once from a cattleman when I was 10. They whipped me and hung my brother for it. Thought killing men like them would balance it. Turns out it just makes the nights longer." Clara studied him. hearing the weight in his words. "You think this makes you right again?" "No," he said, "but it's a start." They camped that night near a stream. The air was cold, stars sharp as nails overhead. Clara built a small fire and dried the children's clothes, while Cole cleaned his rifle, his movements slow, deliberate. The sound of fire crackling was the only warmth between them. "You could have left," she said. "No one would have blamed you." He stared into the flames. "You would have." She didn't answer. Later, when the others slept, he sat apart beneath a pine tree, lighting a cigarette. The glow briefly lit his face, showing scars along his jaw and a tiredness that ran bone deep. He thought of Dawson, of Eli, of all the faces that still haunted him when he closed his eyes. In the darkness, Clara's voice broke the quiet. "What happens when they find us?" He exhaled smoke. "Then we keep moving." "Until when?" He looked at her across the firelight. "Until there's nothing left to run from." The next day brought clearer skies, but heavier hearts. By noon, the river came into view, swollen and fierce from the rain. Its muddy waters twisted between rocks, foaming white. Cole dismounted, testing the current. "It's high, but we can make it if we go one at a time." Clara frowned. "It'll sweep the horses away." He shook his head. "Not if you hold steady." They tied ropes around their waists, guiding each rider across. The first child made it safe. The second nearly fell, but Cole hauled him upright with a grunt. When Clara's turn came, she gripped the reins and urged the horse forward. The cold hit like knives, stealing her breath. Midway through, the current surged, lifting her off the saddle. She gasped and grabbed the rope, but her fingers slipped. "Clara!" Cole shouted, plunging into the river. The water swallowed them both. For a heartbeat, she saw nothing but churning gray. Then strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her toward the far bank. They collapsed on the muddy shore, coughing up water, shaking with cold. She turned to him, breathless. "You're insane." "Maybe," he said, smiling faintly. "But you're alive." That night, they made camp under a bluff. The survivors huddled together, whispering prayers. Cole's shoulder bled anew from the strain. Clara cleaned the wound with trembling hands, sewing the torn skin with thread scavenged from her pack. He winced but didn't flinch. "You could have let me drown," she said quietly. He met her eyes. "Not my way. You shoot men without blinking. Different kind of drowning." She paused and said, "You don't talk much." He gave a half-smile. "Words cost too much out here." When she finished bandaging him, they sat in silence, watching the fire burn low. The night air smelled of pine and wet earth. For the first time since Eli's death, Clara felt something close to peace. Not safety, but a fragile kind that comes from knowing someone else might bleed for you. At dawn, a rider appeared on the ridge. He wasn't from Dawson's crew. His coat was black, his horse lean and fast. Cole spotted him first, hand going to his rifle. "Bounty hunter," he muttered. The man rode down slow, face hidden by a scarf. When he spoke, his voice carried cold amusement. "You Avery?" Cole didn't answer, but the rifle's barrel lowered an inch. "I heard Dawson's paying $500 for your head. Alive if possible." Clara stiffened. $500. The hunter smiled beneath his scarf. "Guess you're worth more than gold now." Cole said, "Turn around. You can tell Dawson you never found me." The man chuckled. "Can't do that, friend. Too much money in your silence." The standoff broke fast. The hunter drew first, but Cole's shot hit the man's arm, spinning him sideways. He fired again, missed. The third shot took him down. The echo faded. The only sound left was the rustle of leaves. Cole lowered his gun slowly, breathing hard. Clara stared at the body, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll send more." He nodded. "Always do." The others stood frozen, fear spreading among them. They all knew what that bounty meant. No town would take them in now. No lawman would side with them. They were outlaws by proximity. By nightfall, they found a cave near the ridge, deep enough to hide their group. The wind whistled at the entrance, carrying the smell of rain-soaked soil. Inside, firelight painted their faces in flickering amber. Clara sat beside the flames, staring at her hands. The revolver rested in her lap. Cole cleaned his rifle in silence across from her. Finally, she spoke. "You ever think about what you'll do when this is over?" He looked up. "Ain't over till we're buried. I mean after Dawson. After the fighting." He considered that, then shook his head. "Never thought that far ahead." She studied him quietly. "Maybe you should." He gave a low chuckle. "Maybe you should stop thinking I'm some man who deserves to live after all he's done." "You saved children," she said. "That counts." He leaned forward, eyes meeting hers through firelight. "Not enough." Outside, wind moaned through the rocks. The children slept in a corner, their breathing soft. Clara took a revolver and aimed at a rock, practicing as Cole watched. "Hold it steady," he murmured. "Don't fight the kick. Let the shot break on the breath." She exhaled and squeezed. The gun roared, echoing through the cave. Her hand stung, but she hit the mark. A faint smile crossed her face. "Maybe I'll get the next one before you do." He grinned, a rare, fleeting expression that softened his scarred features. "Maybe you will." Later, as the fire burned low, Clara found herself watching him sleep. He looked younger, almost peaceful, though his hand never left the rifle beside him. She whispered into the dark, "You're not who you were, Cole." He didn't stir, but his brow furrowed, as if he'd heard her anyway. When morning came, the storm clouds had cleared, leaving the sky pale and endless. They packed in silence, preparing to move again. Before mounting up, Clara found Cole standing at the mouth of the cave, staring toward the horizon. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He didn't look back. "Thinking maybe the only way to stop running is to face what's chasing us." She nodded slowly, understanding. "You mean Dawson?" He turned to her. "Yeah, him, and the man I was when I worked for him." For the first time, Clara didn't flinch at his honesty. She just said, "Then let's finish it." The wind lifted the hem of her coat, carrying the smell of smoke and promise. They rode out together, their silhouettes fading into gray distance. Two souls bound for reckoning. And though neither said it aloud, they both knew the next time the rifles fired, one of them might not ride back. The wind carried a bite that morning, cold and sharp as cut glass. The plains stretched endless under a washed-out sky. No gold, no glory, just the gray truth of the land. Cole Avery rode ahead, his coat snapping the wind, his horse dark with sweat. Behind him, Clara kept pace, rifle slung across her back, her eyes fixed on the trail that led east toward Hell Creek. That's where Dawson was, where it would end. They'd been riding for 2 days with no rest, chased by hunger, ghosts, and men. The survivors they'd helped were safe now, hidden miles behind them in the canyon. But Cole and Clara didn't talk about safety anymore. They talked about finishing. "You sure he's still there?" Clara asked, her voice rough from dust and silence. "He'll be there," Cole said. "He always camps where he can see a man coming. Likes to watch fear walk toward him." The land ahead grew meaner, jagged ridges, thorn brush, and dry creek beds carved deep like scars. Vultures circle high, slow and patient. By noon, they came upon a dead rider, one of Dawson's scouts. Bullet hole clean through the chest. Clara dismounted and checked his pockets, finding a folded map stained with blood. "Hell Creek," she murmured, tracing a finger along the route. "He's stockpiling there. Ammunition, horses, maybe 50 men." Cole nodded grimly. "He's building a fort." She looked at him, brow furrowed. "You think 2 people can walk into that and live?" He reined in his horse, eyes distant. "I'm not planning on walking out." Her hand tightened on the map. "Don't talk like that." He gave her a tired smile. "Ain't talk. It's math." They rode on until the sun dropped low, the sky fading iron blue. Coyotes called in the distance. They camped in a ravine where the wind couldn't find them. Cole unsaddled his horse and poured water into a tin for the animal. Clara lit a small fire with dry twigs, her hand shaking only when she thought he wasn't looking. After a while, she said quietly, "You could still leave. There's a path north. The law won't follow past the ridge." He shook his head. The law don't scare me. Memory does. She stared into the flames. You think killing Dawson will fix that? No, but it'll stop the bleeding. The silence stretched long. Then Clara reached into her satchel and drew out a worn revolver. Eli's gun. She set it beside him. He would have wanted you to have this. Cole looked at the weapon for a long moment. His voice was low when he said, he would have wanted you to keep it. I'm not the one Dawson's coming for, she replied. Their eyes met. Two lives broken by the same man, both too proud to admit how much they'd already lost. Cole finally said, if I don't make it, take the horses. There's a rail line 3 days north. Tell them your husband died in a mining collapse. They'll believe it. Clara's jaw tightened. If you don't make it, neither do I. He turned sharply. Don't say that. It's not a choice. Her voice cracked but didn't falter. You came back for us. You stayed when you could have run. I'm not letting you face him alone. Cole wanted to argue, but something in her eyes stopped him. The same fire that had carried her through everything since her world burned. He sighed, looking away. Then we ride at dawn. The fire burned low. The night pressed close. Somewhere beyond the ridge, lightning flashed without thunder, painting the horizon white for a heartbeat. Cole sat awake long after Clara slept, sharpening his knife with slow, deliberate strokes. Every scrape of steel on stone felt like a prayer he didn't know how to say. When dawn came, the world was colorless, a thin mist rolling over the land like breath. They mounted up and rode in silence, the sound of hooves muffled by the damp ground. As they neared Hell Creek, the air grew still. The creek itself was a shallow slash through the dust, lined with blackened stumps and broken wagons. Across it, perched on a rise, stood Dawson's camp, a sprawl of tents and timber walls, smoke drifting from cook fires. Cole studied it through a spyglass. He's got men on the ridge, 2 with rifles, 1 by the gate, maybe more inside. Clara adjusted her hat. What's the plan? Walk in quiet. End it loud. He handed her a small pouch. Inside were cartridges, Eli's bullets, polished and ready. She nodded, slipping them into her belt. They moved down the slope, keeping low, the morning fog curling around their legs. Horses tied, rifles loaded, hearts steady. The smell of damp ash filled the air. Cole's mind was clear now, stripped of fear, stripped of hope. Only purpose remained. By the time the first guard saw them, it was already too late. The guard shouted, but the rifle cracked before he had finished a word. Cole's shot hit clean, dropping him where he stood. Clara fired next, taking down the second man on the ridge. The camp erupted, shouts, gunfire, horses screaming. They ran for the gate, using the smoke for cover. Bullets tore the air. Cole kicked the door in and swung his rifle like a club, knocking one man into the mud. Another lunged with a knife. Cole caught his wrist, twisted, broke it clean, then fired point blank. Clara was at his back, reloading fast, face streaked with dirt and fury. Every shot she fired was steady, every move exact. Barn! Cole shouted. He'll be there. They cut through the chaos, ducking between tents and wagons. Men were shouting Dawson's name, trying to rally, but the camp was falling apart. The element of surprise was gone, but so was their fear. The barn loomed ahead, its doors chained. Cole swung the butt of his rifle, snapping the lock. They burst inside. Dawson was waiting. He stood near the stalls, hands resting on the belt of his coat. His hair was gray now, his eyes pale and pitiless. You look older, Avery, he said, and stupider. Cole raised his gun. You look the same, like something that should have died already. Dawson laughed, a dry, mirthless sound. You brought her, too. Touching. I didn't think you'd turn family tragedy into a love story. Clara stepped forward. You killed my husband. Dawson tilted his head. Man couldn't mind his business. Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. You hurt her again, and you won't even get a last word. Dawson smiled, slow and cruel. You think you're better than me, boy? You were my dog. I trained you to kill. Only difference now is who you're aiming at. Cole didn't answer. His rifle fired. Dawson dove behind a post, returning fire. Wood splintered. Horses screamed and kicked in their stalls. Clara rolled behind a trough, loading and firing through the smoke. The gunfight tore through the barn, close, brutal, deafening. Dawson moved with the cunning of a man who'd survived too long, his bullets cutting through dust and light. Cole took one in the leg, stumbled, gritting his teeth as blood soaked his jeans. Clara shouted his name, crawling across the dirt to reach him. He waved her off. Stay back. But Dawson saw her move and fired. The shot grazed her arm, spinning her sideways. Her revolver clattered to the floor. Cole's rage burned white. He rose on one knee and fired 3 times, each shot driven by everything Dawson had taken. The last one hit true, center chest. Dawson staggered, eyes wide, blood blooming on his vest. He tried to speak, but only a wet gas came out. Cole limped forward, standing over him. That's for Eli. Dawson smiled faintly through the blood. You'll never wash me off you. Then his head fell back, and he was gone. Silence filled the barn, heavy and unreal. Smoke hung in the air, the smell of gunpowder thick as grief. Clara crawled to Cole's side, pressing her hand to his leg. You're bleeding bad. He gave a shaky grin. Had worse. She tore a strip from her skirt and tied it tight around the wound. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed clear. We need to get out before the rest find us. He nodded. You go first. I'll cover. Not without you. Clara, don't you dare, she snapped. Don't you dare die after all this. Outside, more gunfire crackled, Dawson's men furious and disorganized. Clara grabbed a revolver and fired through the gap in the barn door. Cole reloaded, every motion slow now but surer. They fought side by side, smoke and dust turning the world to shadows. One man tried to flank them. Clara took him down with a shot that echoed off the hills. Cole dropped 2 more. Then the rest broke, fleeing into the ravine. For a long moment there was nothing, no sound but wind through broken boards. Clara turned to Cole. It's over. He sank against the wall, breathing hard. No, it's just quiet. She knelt beside him, wiping blood from his face. You're coming with me. He gave a faint smile. You always were stubborn. Learn from the best. They left the barn as the first light broke through the mist, painting the land in pale gray. The camp lay in ruins, tents torn, fires smoldering, the dead scattered among the mud. Cole leaned on her shoulder as they walked to the horses. His limp was bad, but he didn't complain. When they reached the ridge, Clara looked back one last time. Smoke rose from Hell Creek, curling into the dawn. Cole said quietly, You ever wonder if peace even exists? She looked at him. Maybe not, but this is close enough. They rode until the camp was just a shadow behind them. The land open ahead, wide and waiting. After miles of silence, Clara said, You could start over. New name, new place. He didn't answer right away. Then, with a slow smile, he said, Only if you're there to remind me who I was. She met his gaze. Then I guess I'm not done riding. They crossed the last ridge as the wind rose behind them, carrying the faint sound of gunfire fading into memory. Ahead lay nothing but open country and a thin, uncertain light. 2 riders against the horizon, scarred, silent, but unbroken.